Good day, good people. My name is Gentleman Viking, and welcome back to part 3 of my rewrite of Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, before we begin, I know it's been months and months since I last posted. Apart from the usual life stuff, I pretty much felt pretty disenfranchised with Star Wars as a franchise. The whole Last Jedi thing really just. Yeah, as I've been saying in my other videos, I wasn't a huge ass fan of Star Wars, but I just lost what little like I had for it with all of the controversy and all the bullshit going on. But I figured, the new movie's coming out, I'll jump back into the swing of things and see what I can do. With that out of the way, let's get back to the movie. Well, my movie. So, when we last left, FN2187 and Poe had both been arrested. They were being held in the First Order Star Destroyer. Now, Scene 3 opens on Jakku, with small fighter-sized tug ships, similar to a tugboat. They're flying into a hangar bay on the surface of one of Jakku's moons. Now, as a quick refresher, beforehand I said why not make it so that Jakku is essentially a gigantic junk ball in space with its own gravitational pull, with a few moons of actual moons circling it. So that's why I said Jakku's moons. So a woman in flight gear and a flight helmet gets off of one of the tugboats. She walks off of her ship and onto the main hangar deck. She's surrounded by comrades. They're all laughing, carrying on, patting each other on the back. And while she's in the group, she stands apart from them. She doesn't quite fit in. So the rest are all jerking around, but she's just walking silently. She walks out onto the counter where we see Unkar Plutt, same as in the Force Awakens, but this time he's working as a register, more for the, licensing out those ships, and then the other, her and the woman and the other pilots, the woman and the other pilots are working under him to pretty much tug around the ships or go and scavenge cargo from material from these derelict ships. She hands over the flight helmet, and in return he hands her back from a little storage locker a little 15 centimeter long, about that long, a little metal cylinder and a stack of credit chips for a day's work. And you briefly focus on that little cylinder thing, and eventually I'll get into what that is. So, while she's collecting her belongings, she's still not talking, she's in total silence. Unkar Plutt tries to persuade her into this lucrative side business that he has. And while we don't say it, you can sort of imply that it's something either seedy or illegal. And the woman, she has her standards, so she just looks at him in disgust and says, ugh, and then walks off. And then we see Unkar pretty much shake his head and then leer at two of his other workers working on the hangar deck. As she's walking away, the woman gets invited by a few of her other fellow pilots. Oh, hey, we're going to go for a drink. You want to come with us? You don't mention her name. You say, hey, you want to come with us? And she just politely raises a hand, nods no. And as she's walking away, you can hear a few of them in the background say, oh, hey, man, why'd you bother trying to invite her? She always says no. And he says, oh, she always looks so lonely. I was just trying to be nice. I know that's probably going to make some people flip their shit, but this is my movie. Anyway, so the woman boards a hover train again in silence. She's surrounded by people talking. She's just sitting there looking off into nothingness. it's more to emphasize how alone she is. She's isolated herself for what reasons we don't know yet. She arrives back at her dwelling. It can be on the outskirts of the city, kind of like in Force Awakens, that her shelter, Rey's shelter, was essentially out in the middle of nowhere. You can even have it another derelict, like Imperial walker or whatever, just something to that's a bit unique to her. She carves another notch into the wall, kind of like Force Awakens, prepares herself something to eat, puts away her things, and then, yeah, sits down, prepares a meal, and sits outside in silence, looking up at the stars. And then a small beggar child approaches. Sorry, my phone's running out of battery. A small beggar child approaches and just keeps on eyeing off her meal, clutches his stomach, trying to guilt trip her a little bit, but she can also see that this kid is genuinely hungry. He's wearing rags, probably hasn't eaten in days. And this is where we hear her first words. She dips some of her bread into her soup, or whatever she happens to be eating, and gives the boy something to eat. And she says, "I know what it's like to be hungry." And the child gives her a hug, and then she says to him, and points off into the distance, "There's a shelter about 5 blocks that way. I used to stay there when I was your age. You can get a bed to sleep for the night, and you'll be safe. Just watch out for the older kids." And then the little boy smiles and then runs off. So that is more to show that even though in her interactions we've seen Rey, we still don't know her name in this part of the movie, at least it's not said yet, but the woman, she does have compassion for others, especially those who are less fortunate than her, but she still tries to keep herself isolated. And then and it also hints to the fact that she grew up on the streets, kind of like this little boy, raised hungry, things like that. And then the last shot can be of her just looking back up at the stars in wonderment, maybe even just looking back down in a bit of frustration. She wants to go out and leave Jakku, but something is holding her there. Kind of like Rey. So, yeah, it's meant to be a woman who feels alone in the world. She's not quick to trust people. She knows how to take care of herself, but is also above breaking the law or debasing herself for others' sake. Thought I might as well plug in my phone. I can edit that out. Anyway, had a rough growing up. Yeah, so another reason I did that was because it's also the opposite of Luke Skywalker in a way. Growing up, Luke had his aunt and his uncle. He had some friends who he hung out with. Biggs, Wedge. He would have fun. He'd go out and shoot womp rats and things like that. Whereas this woman, she has grown up alone. She's taught herself how to look after herself. But both of them look up at the stars and they have some sort of longing. They know that their home isn't meant for them and that they're meant for something, or they want to do something bigger, but something holds them there. For Luke, it was his job, working on the moisture farm with his aunt and uncle, and for Rey, it's something else. So that was just a quick one. That I've described it in a short way, but you can pad it out. It doesn't, like, you can make that scene a few minutes, at least. But it's just meant to be a brief introduction. It's not meant to be a full-on character introduction, unlike some other introductions that we've seen. So we're going to get a twofer today, as I haven't done anything in a while. So, scene 4. So this is going to be the introduction scene between Kylo Ren and Poe. Most of the details are going to be the same, except for a few of the contexts and a few of the details and whatnot. So you can even open with a similar joke. Poe is strapped down to the table. Kylo walks in, stares down Poe, and Poe's like, "So who talks first? Do you talk first? I talk first? How do you get interrogated by a dark Jedi?" or something like that. And Kylo starts torturing Poe for information about his counterintelligence work with the Republic, to once again say that Kylo interrogates Poe about his counterintelligence work, to emphasize again that Poe is a spy with a certain degree of skills. Poe, having been trained in resistance, as in resisting to torture and a little bit of force manipulation, he's holding up pretty well. But eventually, Kylo is laying it on. Poe has never experienced anything like this. Kylo just keeps on breaking down his mental defenses until he starts screaming in pain. And then Kylo's final question to Poe is, where is the location of the new Jedi Temple? And then it's cliche, but you can have Poe look at him wincing in pain, and then he starts screaming even more, and then you have a shot of the door to the interrogation room just zooming out but also spinning around like that. I'm not flipping you off, that's the scene. 2 guards are outside. You might even have them shift a little uncomfortably. Kylo walks out the door and tells a guard to take Poe back to a containment cell. He's taken to a holding area in a cell across from FN-2187, who had been arrested for nonconformity. The two of them briefly introduce themselves. So I'm FN-2187. No, I'm Poe. And they go over why they're there. FN-2187 says he's awaiting reprogramming because he couldn't follow orders. And Poe, still groggy, says they're probably just gonna slap me back in that chair and torture me again, as if it's no big deal. Concern a bit more of a humorous banter than that, if you like. Mainly from Poe, because he uses the humor to try and shield himself. And then FN-2187 can be like, "Oh, you seem pretty nonchalant for a guy who's being tortured." And then Poe puts his stump arm. Remember, he's got a prosthetic arm. He puts his stump up onto the grill in the door and says, "Oh, don't worry, my escape is being worked on." Now you cut to Poe's mechanical arm. It can either be sitting in an armory or in the First Order medical bay, and the hand starts to gently wiggle around. It starts moving its fingers, and then very slowly it unfurls itself, folds in on itself, until it creates a small droid, using, I've got it here, 3 fingers for legs, 2 fingers for tools and arms, with the bulk of its body being the forearm. It can either hack into the door to open it up, or break into an air vent, start sneaking through the facility. and it works its way through the ship. You can have a couple of shots. I've called it the hand droid for the moment. Have a few shots of the hand droid moving through the ship, dodging troopers, blending in with other droids. Maybe even throw in the old Nazi BB-8 unit from Force Awakens, the one with the flat top. Just to at least have another unique droid design in there. Poe and FN-2187, they're sitting in their cells, and the power goes out in that section. Suddenly, Poe's door starts to clank a little bit, and then it opens up briefly. He runs over there, opens it up the rest of the way, says, AL6, glad you could make it. Thanks for getting me out of here. And the droid gives a few quizzical beeps. It doesn't talk, it's like a normal another droid. It just communicates in beeps and bloops. Gives a few curious ones, and Poe says, what do you mean you didn't shut off the power? But it doesn't matter, look, we gotta get out of here. And he looks at FN-2187's door, which is still closed, and he walks up to the grill, says to FN, do you want to get out of here? Well, I don't have anywhere to go, this is all I've known. He's like, well, if you stay here, you're just going to be reprogrammed into who knows what. If you stay here, then you'll just be reprogrammed into who knows what. You can stay at my place if you wanna, but we gotta leave now. FN stands up, moves to the door, and says, anything has to be better than this. Get me out of here. Poe nods to his hand droid. AL6, open it up. The droid jumps onto the wall, uses like a little laser or something to break into the door circuit, starts fiddling with some wires. The door unlocks and then cracks open a peep. And then FN and Poe open the door the rest of the way. That's also when you could have that brief moment of them, like Poe saying, by the way, I don't want to keep on calling you FN-2187. How about I call you Finn? And Finn is like, oh yeah, I like that name. Yeah, call me that. So, as you're doing this, you have Poe pick up his arm. It refolds back into it. Sorry, he picks up his hand droid. It refolds itself back into the prosthetic arm. And then he clicks it back into place, winces in pain because it's reconnecting to all of his nerves or something. And then, yeah, they pretty much run into the bowels of the ship. Now, the reason why I wanted to make Poe's prosthetic arm a droid is two main reasons. One, while BB-8 was a pretty cool design for a droid, it was essentially just another rehash of R2-D2, except we had a soccer ball instead of a dustbin. Don't at me. You know it's true. But anyway, having a droid that molds from a prosthetic arm or a prosthetic is something, personally, I've never seen before in any sci-fi, let alone Star Wars. If you think you've seen it somewhere else, let me know in the comments below. I might give it a watch. But yeah, it's something unique. And yeah. And while this scene is kind of like the jailbreak scene from A New Hope, a lot of it does have the details mixed around. They're breaking out instead of breaking someone else out. They're starting from the bowels of the ship. They don't have to head from their ship to the prison and then back again. I'll have to pick this up later. Anyway, back to where I was. Yeah, so while the scene is very reminiscent of A New Hope, a few of the details are changed around. But unfortunately for this next scene, I'm heavily borrowing elements from A New Hope again. So we see two stormtroopers walking through the hangar bay. Actually no, they're walking through the corridors towards the hangar bay. One of them keeps on looking around nervously, muttering to himself, okay, we'll be okay, we'll be okay. And then one of the troopers, who's Poe, turns to the other, which is Finn, and says to stop looking around, you're going to give us away, stop being so nervous, we'll be fine. And then Finn responds, oh, just because we were lucky to find an unguarded armory for these disguises, it doesn't mean that we're free and clear. And then pretty much in direct response to that, the alarm starts going off. And then an announcement says, attention all troopers, 2 prisoners have escaped from cell block A, stun and detain. And then that plays on a loop a couple of times. So Finn and Poe start running down the corridor towards the hangar bay now. Some of the troopers are running around securing the area, but the hangar bay is mostly empty now, even of the slaves. They jog towards one of the TIE fighters that's in the hangar bay. And they're stopped just outside by a trooper with a black mark running down the front of his helmet. And to denote that he's a higher rank. The lieutenant says to these 2 random troopers, you 2 aren't meant to be here, return to your unit. And then Poe, in his disguise, responds with, we were ordered to reinforce the area in case the escapees try and steal a ship. Well, who gave you those orders? And that's when Finn responds with, we were ordered by DX045. And then that lieutenant says, I gave no such orders like that. And then Poe and Finn look at each other like... And then Poe just raises his blaster and shoots the lieutenant with the stun setting. And then Finn is just like, you shot him! Yes, I did. He was about to arrest us. He'll be fine. He's just stunned. We got to get out of here. Get up there. And then the rest of the scene is almost the same as The Force Awakens. They jump into the TIE fighter. There's an unauthorized launch from the control room. But one key difference I wanted to make is instead of Finn just suddenly shooting all of the troopers in the bay, he actually stops himself. I found it really weird that Finn didn't want to take life on Jakku, and he started having a panic attack because he felt like it was the wrong thing to do. But then suddenly he's mowing down his fellow troopers, people who he's known for years, like they were nothing. Now, even in my version, Finn isn't an actual stormtrooper. He's just been trained to be one. I still decided to have him say something along the lines of, he's lamenting the fact that I can't shoot them, these are my friends, it's wrong. And Poe instead tells him to shoot the other TIE fighters, that way they can't follow us, and the explosions will throw them off. We'll throw off the guys on the ground. And then Finn shoots the TIE fighters, they break out of the hangar, they shoot some of the turbo lasers, but then they get shot down by the cannon and crash onto Jakku. And then, instead of Finn saying, instead of Poe saying, we gotta go for my droid, he says, don't worry, my ship is down there, we can use that to escape the First Order. So yeah, that's my 2-for-1 deal on scenes 3 and 4. I hope you liked them. If you have any questions or if you have any suggestions from where this can go, let me know in the comments below. I know it's cliche, but if you feel free to like, share, and subscribe the video. The more views I get, essentially the more inclination I have to keep on making these videos more often instead of every 6 months or so. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ra!